Ann Murphy. Guys, good to see you guys again.
Yeah. How are you?
Ceiling, right?
Ceiling, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Do we need to wear a mask in here?
Yeah, you do, I think. Okay.
So here we are again. Here we are again.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. This is like what, our 10th meeting and nothing.
Well, we're making good progress. We got a lot of projects going. So.
Well, let's talk about Gateway. Have you seen Gateway?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that are going to be happening.
Well, they're dredging the creek deeper. I saw them doing it. They dug and dug it so more water goes in there, which now backs up in my yard.
The dredging is going to cause more water to be retained and then go, and you're right downstream from Gateway?
Yes. So when Gateway floods, now what they did now, they dug up Gateway so because people are threatening to leave. I'm going after these people because this is ridiculous. So now because you're losing tenants, I spoke to the guy in Gateway.
Oh, Michael Tomeo, yeah, the Regency guy. The Regency guy, the guy from Regency?
Yeah, but not him. I spoke with Bill Madaway. He's a nice man.
Oh, okay.
They're losing tenants. Trader Joe's threatened to leave, a couple stores. So they're ripping up the whole thing, and some more the water now, where's the water going to go? Right in the creek.
I think the reason they did that was to support the bridge.
That's not true.
I don't know. I didn't hear anything about that.
Welcome everyone to the special meeting of the Board of Supervisors. We are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, tonight we are going to start with Mr. Martin to kick things off.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the public. Please, thank you for attending tonight's special meeting of the Board of Supervisors on strategic funding opportunities. We'd like to go over a few ground rules for the evening before we get started. Staff will do a quick overview of the options and address some of the comments and questions received since the initial rollout at the February 28th Board of Supervisors meeting. Mr. Duraco will walk through a few of these in a moment. After that's completed, we will open the floor for public comment, input, and questions. We want to hear from you about which options you find appealing or don't find appealing. We ask you that you are concise with your feedback and respectful of all participants. In addition, we try to keep our comments to the point and short as possible so everyone can be heard tonight. We're going to make every effort to gauge your feelings of the residents here and who are participating virtually. Finally, this is not your only chance to be heard, your voice to be heard. You will have another opportunity at our special meeting April 4th at 7 p.m. and expect to have this on the agenda at the April 21st regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors. You may also submit written feedback directly to the board via the email address ttbosmeeting@tredyffrin.org. So with that, I'll be turning it over to Mr. Duraco to start us off tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I'll wait for Gene to pop it up here. Here we go. So, after last week, we received some feedback, both from members of the public as well as the board, just about trying to really take a step back and look at a higher level of the impacts and what each alternative nets the township. So I'll just start real quick with our current situation. Right now, 2022, our average real estate tax bill is $595.06. Sewer bill of $250. So when you're looking at what residents are currently paying, it's about on average for the, again, resident, $845.06. Looking at, again, it's just a 20-year bond. What does that do? So it's about to cover the cost of the debt service, we would raise taxes, and it would mean about a $53 increase on average to our residents, raising the real estate tax bill from $595 to $648. Sewer bill obviously doesn't change. And again, that is I used a $12 million bond issuance. Again, that's one issuance, and all that covers is the next 5-year capital plan that we have prescribed right now. So from 2022 to 2026, that covers our stormwater needs as well as our non-stormwater infrastructure and any vehicle and equipment purchases. Again, the limitation here is that it's one issuance for 5 years. We're going to need several of these, especially for stormwater as the years go on. Earned income tax. So we wanted to break it down into kind of two silos here. One for people that are paying already, one for those who are not paying. For the people that are paying, it has zero impact, right? So the situation that we have today with your real estate tax, your sewer bill, remains unchanged. The big one here, again, as we talked about last week, the big impact, and this is the largest impact on any of our residents, would be, essentially $1,365 or $64.29 for the average household that's not paying right now. What does that net? I said that's almost $5.9 million. The way I got that number is, again, it's 11.71 total, but as you see at the bottom there, we fully expect the school district to come in and take half of the revenue. So what that covers is, again, this would cover the projected stormwater program, which, getting back to last week, was $3.25 million annually. And then that leaves a little bit of money left over for the board to address any additional areas that they want to. Stormwater management fee would, again, we're estimating it to be $226 per resident. It would net us the $3.25 million that we need. But again, the thing that it only covers here is stormwater. So if there was any other things that the board wanted to address, we'd have to determine where to develop that revenue from. Again, you know, the thing I just want to stress, again, these are estimated numbers based on the best information that we have. And then finally, the sale of the sewer system. So I just wanted to show, again, over time, the sewer rates will go up $750 over time. Again, that number's going to increase from where we are now, but there's just no way to know exactly what that's going to be, which is why we're using that $750 for now. We're estimating the sale of the sewer system to net us $75 million. And again, that's a one-time hit. And again, it's very similar to EIT. You know, what does that address? That addresses, you know, the stormwater program, as well as any other areas that the board wants to address. So again, I just wanted to get this out there. That way we can really see, breaking down the numbers, what the impact is for, you know, any given alternative. So with that, I'll turn things over to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Draco. Our goal of this evening is to have an open dialogue. Our overall objective is to select a funding option that limits the financial impact on our residents while trying to solve big issues. Tonight, we would like to, 1, gauge the community's priorities to guide the direction of this strategic funding effort. We know that stormwater is a priority. That's what led us here. But should that be our only focus, or should we consider other financial obligations at this fork in the road? And 2, we are seeking public input on the mechanism by which we raise the money to address these priorities. We are happy to answer questions tonight. We're also going to be continuously updating a dedicated page on our website where we will include FAQs as we receive and answer questions. Now I'm going to go through some guidelines for this evening, which are just a little different from our normal board meetings. The meeting will adjourn at 9 p.m. and will be continued on Monday, April 4th at 7 p.m. When you come up, please speak directly into the microphone and state your name and address clearly. Please be courteous and respectful. As you come up, we do ask that you try to limit your comments to 5 minutes so that we can hear from everyone who wants to speak. We also ask that you try not to repeat what has already been said. I'll also mention that this is not the time to discuss specific stormwater issues. We're focusing on the strategic funding options to hopefully find solutions. So we ask that you not spend time discussing any specific issues that you might be facing. And as always, you can reach out to us after the meeting or come to one of our regular meetings for those issues. Board members are also welcome to ask to speak as well. And I think we can get started at this point. So I'll open the floor for anyone who has a question or a comment.
Good evening. John Ferraro, 203 Pennington Road. I just want to state that I've spent over $70,000 trying to deal with stormwater management on my property. I do not live at the bottom of a hill. I live in the middle of a hill. It has been extremely difficult for us financially to do this. And I think I do not want to see tax funds go to the general fund. I'd like it to go directly to stormwater management. I'd like us to put it in a position where it's not an issue going forward for residents when we're talking 15, 20 years from now. You have a choice on how to do it. If we put it into the general fund, then there's a risk that it will get diverted elsewhere. and I don't want to see that happen. This is costing us too much money. The topology of the land in this township is hills, and we are getting crushed when you're in the middle and the bottom of the hill. So it's a reality. So I don't know, I don't want to see an earned income tax. I think that would be a negative. I don't want to see us sell the sewer facility, and I think the only way to do it, in my perspective, is a stormwater fee. $225, $250 a year, when you spent $70,000, I think is a deal. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. Would anyone else like to come up?
Hi, I'm Sam Butra from 567 Red Fox Lane, and Red Fox and Kennedy have never been studied for a proper storm drainage system. I had brought this up before, and I'm saying, please do the storm drainage study while you're doing other studies to include for the Red Fox and Kennedy, because constantly the water comes into our basements or wipes out a lot of our lawns because the storm water is without any hindrance coming. So when I had complained before, they did put macadam curb near my house. It has alleviated somewhat the problem. We still put in our drainage from the houses because this rain-wise it does create problem. But overall, I've seen my neighbors and all spending money for alleviating this problem. We just don't know how. There's no stormwater system whatsoever on Red Fox and Kennedy. So could you please add that to your system?
So I will mention that in a separate part of this major effort for stormwater, we are going to be issuing an RFQ this year to have an engineering study to take what our task force put together to come up with a priorities plan. So tonight we're not focused on which projects would get done. That's a separate effort that we're doing in any case. Do you have any comments on what type of funding mechanism you would prefer, or questions about those options?
It all depends on the study what you do here, because at present, personally, I think you guys are violating the code. Because normally, whether you take the UBC or IBC, I don't know which one you guys have adapted, that's the Uniform Building Code of America or International Building Code. Most of the municipalities have adopted in International Building Code. So probably you guys are into it. But if stormwater system-wise, polluted water is not supposed to be drained or put into the private residences. And right from the beginning, it's happening. So I'm saying, fine, we will sit down with you later on if you want, whatever it is. How the funding happens, I don't know. That is your department. But all I'm trying to put in is on the table a problem that we have. Okay? All our members, if you want everybody to come, I will bring the whole street here. Okay? But it's up to you guys how you want to do it.
Thank you for coming. Thanks for your comment.
Hi, Sarah Owens, 251 Irish. My question is specific to the stormwater management fee. Would businesses and the school in particular, the school district, also be paying the fee in a titrated way so that they have money to then implicate stormwater management practices? So they're using the stormwater system, particularly with their new parking lot. So will they be also paying a fee in terms of, is that on the table, and businesses that are teeing into the already existing system and using it?
I think that the fee, as we have calculated it, considers that commercial and schools would be paying it.
Okay.
The details of any, whichever direction we go, we'll have to work out all those details. But that is kind of the default plan.
Okay. And then my second thing is, if there is an earned income tax and the school is going to get half of that money, is some of that going to have to go into them managing their own stormwater, again, not overloading the system in the surrounding area? And is that not prescribed when they get the money?
I don't think an EIT has anything to do with stormwater. If we
Okay.
were to implement it, we would
Okay.
probably find a way to, Mr. Ferrero, your point of whichever option, I completely agree with you, that whatever option we choose, we would want to have lock boxes. So we would probably try to work around the rules of the EIT, maybe in
Got
our own budget, have a lockbox for stormwater.
But that can't
the
be
school district
dictated
would
onto
not.
the school district, okay.
Yeah, we
Yep.
have no control over how they would use their
Okay,
EIT.
okay, thank you.
Stephen Stefanik, 126 Coldstream Drive. Like John, I would agree with a stormwater fee. Lived in our place for 24 years. Every year it gets worse and worse and worse with the water coming down. While we talk about the fee and what we want to do going forward, what I really would implore is that we put a moratorium on any more variances to the floodwater codes that we have, or the storm management codes we have today. We see examples quite often where there's variances granted, and it just makes things worse. So if we could just, it's almost like global warming, right? We want to stop the greenhouse gases. We want to stop giving variances so the water doesn't just keep getting worse and worse and worse. So I'd ask if there's a way to put a moratorium on any more variances to parking lots, buildings, whatever it is, not to continue to expand their footprint. And just FYI, from my experience, not talking a lot about it, but our yard probably saw 2 to 3 feet higher water last year than we've ever seen before. I got a row of arborvitaes in my backyard. I'm 5'10" and 3/4, almost 6 foot. And after each storm, I was pulling debris out of the trees that were above my head. So I had over 6 feet of water rushing through my backyard. And a lot of it comes down, contention, comes off the runoff down past from Jenkins Arboretum. So it just keeps getting worse. And a lot of it has to do just with code variances. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Scott Delaney, 763 Mansell Road in Wayne. So I grew up around here. I've said this to you once before, but and moved away and came back, but the water's definitely getting worse. Do we know how big the problem is, and how do you study that? And I haven't spent $70,000, but over the years, including this past year, I don't know where it's all coming from, but it's eroding my lawn and driveway and others. And then you see it in Mansell, you know, is very hilly. So your question was which type of funding method? So there's definitely a problem, I know that. I'm not really in favor of an earned income tax because the taxes just go up everywhere and the cost of living and everything else is way up. But a fee that addresses the problem and then funds the fix of that problem and then ongoing. And I haven't studied enough if you sell this system, if that's a benefit in the future to abate future gigantic costs to replace it. But a one-time fee is what I would ask you to do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Mark Smith, 143 Old State Road. I was wondering if someone could elaborate a little bit more on the sale of the sewer system, some of the ramifications as to why that's being proposed as an option, pros and cons.
Mr. Draco, do you want to pull up the slides and kind of talk through that?
So I'll just skip forward. So the sale of the system really comes down to the board kind of narrowing down its priorities in terms of what they want to fund. So in terms of why it's being proposed, again, it's on the table if the board wants to address stormwater as well as some other priorities that we've discussed in the past, which I can show you. So public safety, so police department funding, infrastructure and operating needs for the fire companies, capital, funding our OPEB liabilities and stable.
Excuse me, I don't really want to know what all the different expenses are that could be considered. I want to know specifically related to the sewer system, what are the pros and cons of using that funding source?
That's what it ties into. So depending on what the board is trying to fund, if they're looking to fund above and beyond stormwater, this is an option to doing so. And so this is where that gets addressed, where that money gets spent and allocated.
So what are the pros and cons of using this?
This is David. I mean, Joe, isn't the pros and cons, the pro is that we get a lot of money at one time, which also could be a con depending on how you look at it. And the con is that we have not a lot of control over our rate increases going forward. I mean,
The pro, again, I don't necessarily have this isn't up for my opinion, but one of the pros to this is that it gives the general fund $75 million to deal with many issues that the township's facing. The con, as David just mentioned, is yes, we lose control over the rates, the rate structure that the residents get charged. So over time, obviously that's handed over to the utility, and they're going to charge what they charge over time. One of the things that's proposed in this is establishing a rate stabilization fund to offset those increases every year. And at the time where we were throwing the numbers together, the estimation that I was given was 15 years of a rate stabilization to help offset and gradually bring, residents' rates up over time.
and Joe, what do our surrounding communities pay? What's the rates that surrounding communities that are with Aqua are paying today?
So the average bill of Aqua right now is about $70 a month, though. It mimics your water bill, so around $800, $900 a year. And then they're in front of the PUC right now for a rate increase, which, again, I don't know what that's going to end up being. And again, that's one of the differences, again, when we're thinking about the difference between municipally owned and run system and a utility is we don't get paid to put infrastructure in the ground. A utility does, right? So that's part of how they make their money is by replacing the infrastructure. We replace it because we have to. The trade-off there is, generally speaking, it's significantly cheaper for a utility to replace infrastructure than it is for a municipality. One of the reasons is we're forced to follow prevailing wage, so our labor rates alone are increased. And then there's the economy of scale from them replacing, essentially miles of pipe where we're not. And I gave the board an example of just a snippet of our cost. Last year, the township replaced 100 feet of sanitary sewer line on East Conestoga Road, and it cost the township $100,000. So.
Yeah, I guess, are we selling a beat-up old car, or are we selling a car that's in good condition here? If we're avoiding some potential liabilities or spreading them out over time, I could sort of understand that maybe. But, obviously, if it's worth that much money, that we've kicked a lot into it over the years and don't just give it away.
Yeah, so our infrastructure definitely needs to be addressed. I would say up until recently, our sanitary sewer system is just, I don't want to say ignored, but it hasn't had as much of an infrastructure, hasn't been to the forefront. And so, we have in our capital plan the money allocated to finish replacing all of our pump stations. All of our pump stations, except for one, are original pump stations from the 70s. A lot of, and the board knows this and the public as well, we've dealt with over the last couple of years a lot of emergencies projects due to exposed pipe, due to cracked pipe. And so, yeah, our plan is to become as aggressive as we possibly can with our infrastructure replacement over the next 5 years going forward. But again, that's also going to come at a cost. Our rates are $250 now. I would expect them, as we start to replace all that infrastructure, to need an increase there as well.
I'll let this go in a second, but I guess.
And Joe, how much is in the sewer fund? Why don't you just tell them that too? I think that's helpful.
Sewer fund right now has between $25 and $30 million of cash, which is more than enough to cover our next 5 years for capital.
So if we go from a more or less independently or township-owned system to some other shared system, if that system incurs suddenly some huge liability somewheres, that's going to get spread over us, and we have no control over that, right? So that's kind of one potential thing that could go wrong.
Yes. So the way, as everybody is aware, the way that the rate case works is the utility goes to the PUC and asks for an increase in their rates to spread their infrastructure-related costs, gets spread across their base. So as the number of systems that they have and that they control will directly affect the rate. So the larger the base, the larger, the bigger the money gets spread across. So, the one, in terms of Aqua-owned assets, they don't have as many, from my understanding, as American Water. And so they have if Aqua was to buy the township system, it's going to get spread across a smaller base. But Aqua is also I believe it's hung up in court right now. They're getting ready to purchase Delcora, which would expand their sewer base exponentially. And so again, there's really no way for me to be able to project what that's going to do potentially in 5-10 years down the road and how that changes the equation for rates. But absolutely, one of the biggest things that we lose is control over that rate.
Joe and Bill, maybe you can answer this kind of big picture question. Is the sewer business something we want to be doing in the next 10, 20, 30 years, considering the number of municipalities that are selling their systems and whether or not we're going to find the appropriate people that can actually run these systems? I know we're pretty lucky to have Darren and others in the township with some really great knowledge and experience here. My concern is that going to exist down the road?
Well, I'll start first. That's the million-dollar question, right? That's hard to say. But clearly, the impetus right now, we're a system conveyor. We are not. We don't treat our sewers, so we're really pumping it to the treatment stations. Assuming Aqua purchases Delcora, that's one of the places our flow goes to, a small portion of it. But you're seeing pressure all over. Large utilities are looking to buy the actual treatment plants, and then eventually they will raise our rates once they treat it, because we're just pumping it there and they have to treat it. So we have no way of actually treating what we pump. But yeah, I think the future is at this point that you're seeing a lot of municipalities getting out of this business. It's harder to do. It says we can do it, but it's going to be expensive for us too. I mean, I think the assumption was we're paying $250 now, but over time that will go up, and won't go up as fast as Aqua's or American Water, whoever would possibly purchase a system. But there will be costs that need to go up, and finding those people to do that kind of work. But there will be pressure as these treatment plants get purchased, and and then we float a floor 4 treatment plants. So as 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of those go into into public utilities, it becomes more costly for us. I don't know if Joe, if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I would say in the near term, we are. Again, this obviously is something for the board to consider. But in the near term, we are positioned to do what we need to do to address our infrastructure needs. One of the things that we've talked about with the board is that, I feel like until recently, especially on the sewer side, we've been more reactionary. And so it's very hard to be proactive, especially, in that line of business. But, again, I would echo what Bill said.
Do we have a year-by-year cost of maintenance?
Please come up to the microphone because
Well,
people
can we,
from home can't.
I mean, there's a lot of people here.
I'm
and
sorry, this is absolutely the last thing. If somebody could put up a year-by-year cost at some point to see our costs every year
Yeah.
going up and up.
It was
at a
something
certain
we
rate.
actually talked about today, so something I was working on.
So, Madam Chair, we have 2 virtual hands up. Do you want to do one
Yep.
of those now? And
Sounds good.
Okay.
I can't see the screen, so I can't see who.
Hi, this is Barbara Guido, 308 Valley Stream Lane in Chesterbrook. In the fund you mentioned, in the sewer fund, you're saying $30 million, I believe he just said, and it would last, did he say about 5 years or so? Is that meaning we're spending $6 million a year on sewer costs? I just try to like to understand a little bit more about that.
That 30 million would last more than 5 years, but what I said was we have the money to cover our 5-year capital plan in cash right now.
And Joe, how much is the capital plan for 5 years, roughly?
Give me 1 second, I'll bring that up.
While you're pulling that up, can you give us an idea on what kind of rate increases we might expect to need to do? I know it's hard to project, but if we weren't to sell the sewer system, like how large of rate increases do you think we would require?
So I do have so I'll address the capital question first. We have 17.95 million right now in our 5-year capital plan, so that covers pump station redesigns. That includes the new building that we're building for the sewer department to house all their trucks and equipment, as well as just under $3 million of actual pipe relining or replacing. To answer your question
And
about
how much is in the fund?
how much is in the, it ranges between 25 and $30 million. And then to answer your question about rates, so what I would probably do is look at what our operating costs have been over the last couple of years, and then, project that out again a couple of years if I could, and then prescribe what the difference is. So, again, a 10% increase in sewer rates would be $25. That would be pretty significant. Right now, I wouldn't be able to say with much confidence what we would expect that to be.
So we still have another virtual?
Yeah,
Do you
let's
wanna do
take the other
someone here,
virtual
or-
hand.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm Scott Laird. I live at 942 Ivycroft, and I live at the top of the hill, so my property has not been adversely affected. But I was wondering whether these options that you've presented are mutually exclusive, or whether the town could consider some kind of combination of different aspects or favorable aspects of these funding options to come up with something that will address the concerns or the issues going forward, but also address some of the concerns that you've heard by some of the residents who live midway down the hill or at the bottom of the hill. For those who've been impacted severely, could the town consider some plan for providing some kind of, this may not be the right term, credit or rebate or something for those, if they submit information on how much they've had to endure because of the changing climate and the extreme storms that are way beyond what has been the standard stormwater intensity that engineers use for designing, so that instead of just saying that everybody's going to pay $750 or a sewer fee that, is the same for everybody, but consider something that's a little bit more, flexible, and take the best aspects of these funding options and put them together rather than, have them be mutually exclusive.
Thanks. I think we have discussed, amongst ourselves at least, the option of combining some of these different options. I think they are not necessarily mutually exclusive. So that, if you have specific combinations you want to discuss, I think that that's certainly a possibility. And then in terms of with a stormwater fee, I think there's a lot of details we need to work out for different credits people could receive and things like that. I'm not sure what your specific thought was, but there are definitely a lot of different details that would go into that analysis.
I just want to make that one comment there. On the stormwater fee, we might have, for example, what's the impervious coverage of a property? What's the square footage of a property? And, this isn't, we're not going to be the first township that has done this. And you can move quickly with the right consultant to do this and to get it set up. When I say quickly, I don't mean like overnight. But that will be taken into account, and it will also take into account commercial properties, any other properties, not nonprofit, church properties, anything, school district, just like because they have the impervious coverage. And so that will be taken care of to try to even things out with properties. And it's a difficult task, and it'll be done right, it'll be done fair. We aren't the first ones doing that. And no, they are not mutually exclusive. We've talked about we just kick things around way at you want to go 20,000, you want to go 50,000 feet. But we kick some things around with the sale of the sewer system, maybe, if we do and we do really well and we handle it right and we have the rate stabilization plan and we pay off what we have to pay off and have stormwater fee and we do projects, but we want to have something going on later. We talked about, hey, we can have a stormwater fee, but it need not be maybe at the level that it will have to be, must be now. It wouldn't have to be at that level, maybe. I'm talking in approximations all along the way here. But we would then have an ongoing fee for sustainability later on after we've done that. So no, they're not mutually exclusive,
Well, just to be clear though, Scott, there's a lot of work in each of these ideas. So, if we sold the sewer system, we wouldn't do something else. For example, if we put in a stormwater fee, it needs to be big enough to be worth the effort. But none of these are mutually exclusive. If we put in a stormwater fee now and in 5 or 10 years we decided the sewer system sale made sense or an EIT made sense, there's no reason a future supervisor board couldn't do that. But to implement a $50 stormwater fee and a small EIT, I don't see that making sense because the work is too much for the money.
Come on up.
Hi, my name is Robin Yukam. I live at 10 Walnut Lane in Berwyn, and I've lived there for 26 years today. I purchased my house 26 years ago today.
Happy birthday.
Happy anniversary, actually. 26 years of paying my tax. And like this gentleman over here, I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on repairing my road, repairing my driveway, repairing a bridge that crosses over a stream. But the interesting thing is that did not start until 3 years ago. 3 years ago. So I basically lived here for 23 years without incident, and then a bridge blew out 3 years ago, and then I had significant damage again in August of last year. So, what can we do about this? I don't know. I don't feel it's right to impose a rain tax or stormwater fee on all of the residents, but there's got to be another way to do it. I think from personal experience that it's the development in the township. Like, I live below the school, and when they put in the new when they extended the original parking lot by the high school, not the new teacher parking lot, but they enlarged the original parking lot that was in front of the school entrance. That affected me significantly. Why can't we have the developers who come in, take the land, make the developments, the rest of the neighbors pay the penance, and the developers walk away with a lot of money? Why can't we have those developers pay, I want to say, an almost egregious fee to do the development? Because what they are doing is going to impact the residents that have lived here and are living here and are going to live here after they leave. What the developers are doing, it's going to impact the rest of the residents for a long time. Has that been considered? Doing anything for...
We do have one of the strongest stormwater ordinances that requires developers to put in stormwater management.
But it's management. That's the other thing, is people talk about it as management. That water is still going somewhere, right? You create, you develop, you put in a development of houses, you increase, buildings or whatever, you increase the square footage of buildings. That water is going somewhere. It's not necessarily management or redirecting it. It's like, why do we have to continue to have these huge developments take place? That's what I'm talking about. Like the things that are going on where Circuit City was, going on in Berwyn, next to the Berwyn Tavern, that kind of stuff. All of that stuff is just creating huge amounts of impervious space. Where is all the water going that, could be absorbed into ground?
In some cases, when you have a development that's already there and has no stormwater management, and then you redevelop it by new development, you're actually getting more stormwater management because we require them to put in a system. So there is a little bit of a different, when you just talk about development generally, when you have a bunch of trees and open forested area, that's different. If you develop that area, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of that left in our township that can be developed. But I do just want to make that distinction there, that we do require stormwater management that covers the impervious that was already there as well. So we, in some cases, the redevelopment's actually good for stormwater.
Okay, you still use the word management though, and I'm still thinking about that water's got to go somewhere. Anyway, whatever, I feel like rather than shifting the burden to the current residents, is shifting the burden to the developers, the new development that is coming in. That's what we should do, instead of having like a stormwater management fee.
I understand, I understand what you're saying. I would say the following. One, when you have, again, this, let's call it redevelopment, because that's what a lot of it is now in our township. Some of it's new because it's undeveloped land, but we're putting in a state-of-the-art stormwater, I won't say management, but I'll say stormwater systems. And sometimes it's real hard to manage some of these storms, like Ida. That was a 900-year storm. I heard anywhere from 500 to 1,000-year storm. That's really difficult. As far as, and the developers who are developing now have to put in these stormwater systems, and then if you have a stormwater fee, they are going to be paying the fee, and depending on the size of their property, which properties, and by the way, the school district will also be paying, they'll be paying a stormwater fee. So there will be fees being paid going forward, and that's even after they're building an inclusion of a stormwater management fee in accordance with our stormwater ordinances, which I am told are among the most rigorous in the region, if not the state. All that being said, we still have issues with stormwater. That's why we're talking about a stormwater fee here. That's why we're talking about implementing it. No matter how, no matter what we do here, at the end of the day, there'll be lots of money for stormwater, and it will be dedicated to stormwater. No question about that. So, you know, that's the story of sort of what we're doing tonight, and that's how this fee will work in a global sense. So.
Okay, that's the crux of the situation. My other comment is toward the sale of the sewer. I think the sewer system. I think we need to look at what's going on with our neighbors and how happy the residents of the neighboring communities that have had their sewer systems sold, how happy those residents are. Is it working out well for them? I feel like we're taking something that is really good in Tredyffrin. I know our sewer fees are the lowest of low, wherever you would go, and that's great. Why can't we keep that up? Or like you said, a 10% increase, which sounds huge, is $25 a year. You know, it's nothing. Like, I just feel like losing that control is not, it's passing the buck down. I won't be here when this happens and when all the increases, you know, take place, but I don't feel it's good for the township. And we've got better people here to figure out the situation than selling our sewer system.
Thanks for sharing that perspective.
Yeah,
and you're right that we are aware of reactions from other townships, and if we do go down that path, we're going to try our best to not make some of the same mistakes that they made. Like, we wouldn't just be putting it into our general fund. We'd have separate lock boxes and know exactly where that money's going to. But those are great points. Thank you.
Thank you.
And ma'am, I have a comment with regard to your earlier comment. It's me. So when you didn't want to talk about the term management, but there's only one way to really prevent stormwater from going into the ground. You know, you put it into a management system, it's a holding tank, and then it goes into a stream, it goes into the ground. But the one way that you can actually prevent stormwater from going into the ground is to plant trees. Okay? So plant a lot of trees. What happens is there'll be water evaporating from the leaves, and this is something that we can do as citizens and as individuals. Okay? And don't cut down trees. If you have trees, we have a lot of beautiful trees in the township. Don't cut them down and plant more.
I didn't realize sewer system was also in the thing. I just read the patch, and that's where I thought the stormwater system, and I came for that. But sewer system-wise, how old is our sewer system? And the sewer line which runs through my property, right through my lawn, in the middle of the lawn, is it double-lined so that we have protection in case it bursts? Secondly, I know normally the power plants wise, when you're saying it was Ida was 800 year storm, yes, even nuclear plants are only 500 year developed. Power plants are 100 years. These are isolated incidents. We don't design for those, otherwise we'll go broke if we design for that kind of thing. So ours are 10-year storms or something of that nature in these areas. So I can understand storms, flooding happening intermittently. But normal flows that happen, they should be controlled at the normal flows. And that's what I'm trying to, hopefully will be looked at.
Thanks. How old is our sewer system? Can we answer that?
So the system was built in the 60s and 70s, and it has remained pretty much intact in the original. In some places it's been relined or replaced, but large swaths, original infrastructure, including the pump stations.
It looks like we have a hand raised. Let's do the virtual one, and then we'll move on to the audience.
Hi, good evening. My name is Emily Bell, and I am on the board of the Old Forge Crossing Condominium Association. We have spent well into the 7 figures in our community on stormwater remediation, including flood studies. Last year, we built a berm. We have been dredging our holding pond, which is on a tributary of Trout Creek with increasing frequency. And so these issues are very much front of mind for our board and community. And I will second the suggestion that perhaps we should factor in some sort of concession for private funding of these measures into any fee that might be implemented. But I also wanted to ask for information on any existing requirements around impermeability limits and where the township is in considering a tree ordinance. Thank you.
Thanks. I think we are working on the tree ordinance, but I think we should not focus on that tonight, just because we're focusing on stormwater funding. But you can feel free to reach out to one of us separately, and we can kind of catch you up on I know our stormwater task force is working on the next draft of that.
Can we answer the question on impervious surface?
I don't know if we want to go through all the requirements of impervious surfaces.
Steve's not here tonight to go over that, but yeah, there's impervious requirements based on every zoning district, and they're pretty rigorous compared to other municipalities. So, you know, I'm not sure what the direct impetus of that question is, but we have all those requirements, and as we mentioned, we have one of the strongest redevelopment stormwater ordinances in the state itself. So, yeah, that might be something you want to follow up directly with either zoning or Steve Berg on the engineering department to get into specifics. Maybe it's for your zoning district.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, you know, one of the issues that I'm hearing a lot tonight and talking about development and new development, and I think the way the ordinances are currently structured, it does put a certain amount of onus on the developer. One of the problems that we have, one of our biggest problems, and I think as Mr. Martin said, we have one of the most rigorous stormwater ordinances in the Commonwealth. The problem is that's great for new construction. What it doesn't address is existing situations. It doesn't address all these homes, the vast majority of, we have a built-out township. I know that there's still a few places where you can get things in and you can rebuild, but for all intents and purposes, we have a built-out township, and most of that build-out occurred when stormwater requirements were not as rigorous. So we're now dealing with that, particularly as storm events get heavier. So that's really the challenge that we're dealing with. It's not so much the new construction, because I think our ordinances do address that. It's the existing construction, particularly, we heard from Old Forge Crossing, the real problem, particularly for individual homeowners, is the pre-HOA buildings, the pre-HOA homes where it's, the individual homeowner. So that's part of what we're trying to get at here is, trying to deal with the existing situation that our existing stormwater ordinance, which is very good, but it is only good with regard to new construction, and it doesn't deal with the existing conditions.
All right, Ray Clark from Overlook Place in Malvern. I was co-chair along with Anne Murphy here of our resident stormwater task force, so I'm coming with an agenda. So excuse me for that. But before I forget, one thing about combining the methods that I think Mr. Laird raised, clearly the idea of a bond issuance that was funded from a stormwater fee would be a way to jumpstart a program. And that you could, if you had the management resources to actually manage a lot of investment at one time, then you could get that started and solve maybe more than an annual amount of problems to get going. So definitely that was a good idea to kind of combine the methods. One thing that kind of struck me from the first comment was that despite our 2 years in the task force, there were more issues, there were brand new issues that Anne and I had never heard of came out. And it's clear that stormwater management is an issue throughout the township, and that a solution needs to be kind of broadly based, and we can understand why it's the township's #1 priority, and I think from the task force point of view, a funding mechanism that assured that stormwater management was addressed, that there wasn't some big amorphous pot of money that the township could kind of dip into, regardless of how well it was lockboxed, but that we knew that the money coming in from a fee and the money going out was all around stormwater, that there were the resources to manage it, and that there was a plan in place that would give the residents assurance that their #1 priority was in fact going to be addressed and funded, and that they could see that, and it was kind of reported on every year, that there was a stormwater management department with the proper resources that I see could be funded from the type of money that Joe was talking about. So the task force studied lots of other municipalities around here who have implemented fees. It seems to be working pretty well, and there's some real benefits. It can be related to the amount of runoff you generate, like the impervious surface. Some, not precise amount necessarily, but it can be related to that. It's broadly paid because everybody uses the roads. Roads generate runoff. So I think that kind of having something that is that every resident of the township kind of is weighing in on is a good way to kind of address our #1 priority. And it can be used carefully to reward good behavior. So to incent things going forward, I'm not sure about how much looking back can be done, but obviously that's why you would have a consultant to study how to implement it. I'm really nervous about the township selling one system to invest in another. I mean, it sounds a little kind of strange to me that we should say, okay, well, we don't want to do sanitary sewers, but we do want to do storm sewers. I don't know, that seems kind of odd, and it is that idea of $70 million burning a hole in Joe's pocket that does alarm me a little bit. And obviously the EIT falls very heavily on some people. That's very difficult, I think. And of course the bonds, as we just said, could be something that are done in concert with a fee. In selling the sewer system, a buyer needs to get the return on that $70 million that he's going to invest. And he's going to get that return by raising fees, one would imagine. Maybe could a private buyer be more efficient than Darren and the Public Works team? I don't know. We really haven't seen a business case. How do they make money as a result of investing that $70 million or whatever it is to give to the township? I would be, again, very nervous. Now, it's good for me. I have a septic system, and the increase in rates would fall on the people who pay into the sewer system. But again, that doesn't seem really fair, and I think we're looking for a broad-based solution here. I would like to think we are. As to the other issues, clearly a stormwater fee doesn't solve those, and we haven't heard a lot of residents coming up tonight saying, we need to have lots of money for the fire department or the police department, so I can't really speak to that. But wearing my stormwater management hat, I would argue strongly for a fee as your best solution there. So thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mike Heberg. I'm from Margot Lane in Berwyn. Joe, if you wouldn't mind, could you pull up that the first graph you had? And I guess the first thing I would say while Joe's pulling that up is, there are other priorities that were offered originally. To Ray's point, some of these things. There doesn't seem to be anybody coming to the microphone who wants you guys to put money into the OPEB fund or the pension fund, and I'm not sure that we expected that to happen anyway. But I also think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the township has $22 million a year of revenue that is used to meet those priorities as well as other things that services that the township provides. So there are already streams of income that are in place to deal with some of those other situations. As far as the other thing that I would mention is related to the stormwater fee is that I think we should all remember that while nonprofits would fall under a stormwater fee, commercial property owners already very much do pay real estate taxes. So they are already bearing a significant part of the cost of township services and so forth. So yes, they would also pay a stormwater fee, which would be based presumably on the size of the property, the amount of impervious they have, but they're already paying real estate taxes. One thing I think in looking at what Joe's provided here, which I think is excellent, is you see a number of alternatives and you also see the impact on the average resident. And there are not percentages up there, but there are a number of these increases that are very significant. If you were to look, and all of them are significant, if you were to look at the three options that are being considered, a stormwater management fee would be a $226 increase on, let's assume that you're going to issue the bonds. It would be a $226 increase on $900. The EIT would be a $1,300 increase on top of $900. And the sale of the sewer system would be $750 on top of $900, call it. So these are pretty, the $226 would be another 25% on top of what people are already paying to the township for what the township's providing. And in the case of the EIT, for the median resident, it would be 1.5 times what they're currently paying. So these are big numbers to people. And one thing that I pulled is Pennsylvania compiles, when you do your Pennsylvania state income tax, you provide them with your school district code. And then Pennsylvania compiles income statistics by school district. So in our case, there's two townships, obviously, Tredyffrin and Easttown. So there is no such thing as a pure Tredyffrin number, but based on population, about a third of people in this district live in Easttown, about 2/3 live in Tredyffrin. So I think it's important to remember, when you look at these numbers, when you look at, well, $226 doesn't sound like a lot of money, but there are 8,000 tax returns in this township of $50,000 or less. So let's say that 2/3 of them are in Tredyffrin. You've got 5,000 people whose annual income is $50,000 or less. And for them, an increase of even $226 for a stormwater fee is significant. You look at something like the sale of the sewer system, a $750 increase to somebody who makes $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 is a big deal. And you look at the sewer system, and they don't have a choice. If they've got a toilet in the house, and they're on the sewer system, then they have to deal with that. And that could be very significant to someone who, the 5,000 people in this township that file a return of less than $50,000 a year. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, we're not all, to some people, it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but there's a lot of our neighbors who, for whom these kind of increases are truly significant. And I think it's very important to keep that in mind. As far as the EIT is concerned, I guess a question I have is, would this be able to be passed by board ordinance, or was this something that would have to go to a vote of the township residents?
I think for the township, it would just be by ordinance. I think if the school district does it, it has to go to vote of residents.
Okay, so I guess a follow-on question to that is, if the school district were to take their half of whatever the township raised, what would that have to go to a township-wide vote?
I think it doesn't at that point, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think if we initiate it, I think it doesn't have to go to,
Unfortunately, yeah, they get to ride the township's coattails and get it.
Okay, interesting. So, and I guess the third question is, what happens if, if Easttown doesn't implement an EIT and we do? But, we don't need to get into all those hypotheticals, but it could get pretty odd. So, the other thing that's interesting from the Pennsylvania figures is, I think the number that's been estimated as to the amount of revenue is low. I mean, it looks to me like Tredyffrin, a 1% earned income tax on residents within this township would be over $20 million. Now you subtract off what's being paid to other municipalities, and so those people, but it would, let's say that's $6 million. It would be probably somewhere around $15 million a year in new tax on township residents if this township had an earned income tax.
Where are you getting that? That's fascinating, and I would like to know if you could send that information to us.
This is from the Commonwealth.
No, this is good. This is good because now
they have income they have income distribution. They have, and by the way, this isn't totally a zero-sum game. So in other words, to the extent that we get back the $1 million that township residents are currently paying in East Whiteland now has $1 million less, right? So, it's not like, it's not like I don't care about them at all. It's like, forget that. But truly, this money comes back to us, but they lose it, right? So, and obviously, there's also a bunch of municipalities where they don't currently pay an earned income tax, and this would be new tax on, and this is just our township residents. This would not, the $15 million in new tax on Tredyffrin residents would not include the new tax on people that live in Radnor and work in Tredyffrin, or live in Haverford and work in Tredyffrin, or live in Lower Marion or Upper Marion, or Newtown Township, or Marple Township, or all the municipalities that surround us, where their residents work in our township, don't currently pay an EIT, but would if we implemented one.
I suppose my question would be then, what's your estimate of the amount that Tredyffrin Township would receive if we implemented a 1% earned income tax?
Well, you'd get the income on our residents, right? So anyone who lives here would have to pay it. Now, some of those people are already paying it, and Joe has estimated $6 million, right?
plus I think a 1,000 to Philadelphia.
Okay, but what I can tell you is there would be, between Tredyffrin and Easttown, it'd be $32 million if both had an EIT. And I'm figuring we're two-thirds their size, or a little more than two-thirds, but let's say two-thirds of that money would be somewhere in the low 20s, minus 6 million or 7 million, whatever it is. So it's a big number. That's just on our residents, and then you'd have the Radnor people and the Lower Marion people and all these other folks who work in our township, don't currently pay an EIT. They probably like it. That might be part of the reason why they located their business here or their office here, and they would pay it. So those are just a couple of observations relative to the EIT. I'm trying to not take too much time. And then the final option that's been offered, the sewer system, I just wanted to give a little bit of color to some of what Joe said, which is, there's been a question about, okay, we've got reserves in the sewer fund. What kind of money do we have available in order to fund continued improvements to the sewer fund or repairs or things like that? So the sewer fund takes in $5 to $5.5 million a year in revenues. Is that right, Joe, roughly?
Base, billing is, I think it's 4.4, 4.5, and
right.
Then, tapping and connection fees from there.
Right, so there's 18,000 sewer users. Every sewer user pays $250 a year, so you take in, call it $4.5 million a year in $250 fees. And then when someone connects into the system, you get a new either office building or redevelopment or whatever, then the townships gets, I don't know, 30, what's the tapping fee, $4,000 or $5,000?
It's 30, call it 3,500, I think, or, rounding up.
Yeah, so the township gets money for all the tapping fees, so that might be another $500, $700 million a year. So the township sewer fund takes in $5 to $5.5 million a year. It doesn't spend all that money every year in operating expenses. And I'm looking at Joe because he might have a number, but
It's getting there. It's getting where essentially, if we're, we might be dipping into the reserves a little bit just because our conveyance and treatment costs have gone up. I would say, a decent amount in the last 3-4 years.
Right. So, there's the $30 million accumulated over the last 50 years because the system didn't always spend what it took in revenue. And the idea is to accumulate that money so that it can be reinvested back into the system when maintenance is required, when pump stations need to be redone, whatever the case might be. So that's where the money came from to be used to do exactly what's being contemplated now, which is some of these upgrades. And some things have happened in the past and some things will happen in the future, I'm sure. So, that's how the township, manages that whole process. And I think that there is certainly a substantial reserve there to cover, as Joe pointed out, the capital needs that the system will have over the next 5 years, at least the identified ones. And then if the township were to modestly raise the sewer fee to kind of keep ahead of that, that might be a good way to deal with that. So if he says, okay, I think maybe we should go from 250 to 275 because that would then give us a little more cushion. That money would be there to continue to replenish the 25 or 30 million in reserves so that we don't just draw that down. Because as Joe pointed out, some of these expenses are not within our control because the treatment costs are significant. The treatment costs are probably north of $3 million a year, and those are not fully within our control. To the extent that Aqua and other private utilities acquire those treatment plants, they may be less under our control in the future. So, that's a challenge, but I don't think by any means it's insurmountable. The final thing I'll say is I think that the increases that have been estimated in the sewer rates are, if anything, low. Currently, the rates, what Aqua has applied for is $74, $75 a month, and which would be $900 a year. And then on top of that, they have a charge. People wonder, why does Aqua always replace all these pipes under the road? Because they basically they put a 7.5% charge on every bill in order to pay for replacement of pipes under the road and their infrastructure. So what you're paying on your water bill, which is obviously currently what we have, doesn't include the cost of them replacing the pipes under the road. That's an additional charge, in addition to the usage of the gallons, the number of gallons of water you use. But the other thing is that as they acquire additional sewer systems, it specifically is going to.
I'm just trying to get to your final point because we've allowed way over 5 minutes.
I understand. Thank you. I mean, hopefully it's semi-worthwhile. At least I've said one or two things that are worthwhile. But the other thing is that to the extent that they acquire additional sewer systems, that will impact existing sewer users. So, I mean, there was a notice in if you're an Aqua customer, in your bill that was either I think it was the January bill. And what the notice said was, because we're acquiring the East Whiteland Township system, our sewer customers will all face an increased monthly sewer bill because we have to put an additional $55 million into our rate base, and that increase will be an additional 4.67%. So as Aqua continues, which is like an additional $50 a year, so if you're if Aqua owned your system, own Tredyffrin system last year, we'd get another $50 a year because they bought East Whiteland. We'd get another like $30 because they bought Lower Makefield. Every couple months in your water bill, there is a disclosure that as they acquire additional systems, the dollars that they invest in those systems enter their rate base and impact the rates of all those customers who currently are using them for wastewater. So I think that you're really, I think those rates are going to go up at a much faster rate than we expect, even notwithstanding rate stabilization. And so, I guess the bottom line, I'll get to my conclusion.
All right.
My
Get to the
conclusion
quick.
is that, as Mr. Clark said, I think it makes sense to create a dedicated stream of revenue to deal with a dedicated, specific, high priority that we have. And I think that a stormwater fee is probably the logical alternative for funding the highest priority item that the township has.
Thank you.
You're
Does
welcome.
anyone else want to come up?
I just want to comment on one thing, and Mr. Heber, you and I think your analysis of the sale of the sewer system fits in with generally the way I think about it. You did touch on one concern, really the only reason I think it could be advantageous, and again, I tend to think that the downsides outweigh the upsides, but there is the concern that if Aqua or another private entity starts buying the treatment facilities and they want to buy more systems, they could put a squeeze on them. And it's obviously a concern. I don't think that's a reason to necessarily go down that road, but it is, I think, something we have to keep in mind.
Yeah, could I just make one point here on the sale of the sewer system? I mean, I just testified in opposition to Aqua's rate increase, and basically the way, and Mike said this, I think, pretty clearly, but just to repeat it almost, I mean, they have a rate base. They're guaranteed a return on their rate base. Right now, Aqua is arguing for a 9% return. They're probably going to get 7 or 8, and that's what they're going to get. So if they pay $75 or $100 million for our sewer system, that's going to go into the rate base, and that they are going to get that return on the sewer system. Now, it won't come all from us, but it'll be shared across all their customers. But we're going to have the same thing come back to us, or they buy other places. So our rates are going to go up pretty significantly over time, and there's just no doubt about it. Actually, I had one more point on the EIT. One thing Mike sort of hinted at for a second there, but I don't really nail, is that we have a very competitive office environment right now. I mean, it's competitive if you're trying to lease your building. Tredyffrin is a desirable place to be because we don't have an EIT. I mean, I'm, on boards of companies, and we moved one here partially because we don't have an EIT. I mean, it's also that it's an easy commute. And I would hate to lose that. I think that's an important competitive advantage we have. And these businesses do pay significant real estate tax. So I think that there's advantages to having a competitive office, being competitive as a desirable place to house your businesses.
Hi, my name is Bob Sola. I live at 85 Hillside Road. And I guess my question is, what is the mechanism by which we pursue funding for individual projects with the state? And the reason I bring that up is I was I kind of worked with my neighbors on the Hillside Road stormwater drainage project. And unfortunately, that project has only made the situation, it's fixed other things in the system, including Stratford Park and the pipes along the road, but it made the situation on my property actually worse because the grading was done wrong, and also it's just under-engineered. The reason I asked that question is because I met with Senator Dinniman before he retired, probably like 3 years ago. He had said to me, if you can get the township to do the job, we'll fund half the project. I communicated all that information to the township, specifically Solicitor McKenna, and he said he would take care of it. I heard nothing else about that, and I guess my concern is the project is under-engineered. If we had had more money for that project, I believe it would have been done right and I wouldn't have water on my property all the time. So my question is what is that process like? Who's in charge of it, and how do we do it? Thank you.
So in general, to get state funding, we apply for grants. We have been successful recently in getting state grants for stormwater projects. I believe, I'm not super familiar, I wasn't here then, but it's my understanding that was not that money for that type of project at the time. That Senator Dinniman was mistaken on the availability of funds for that type of project. But we did.
And let me tell you why, because the Upper Gulf Road, Old Eagle School Road feeds directly into that stormwater basin, which I know we have another project coming up, so it'd be interesting to see if we're getting state money for that as well. And also Croton Road puts money down. So there are 3 state roads that feed water directly into that stormwater system. And that's why I went to Senator Dinniman, because it's a state project and everyone knows when you try to get anything done, and fairly, the township will say like, well, that's a state road. So I had gotten that offer, and I guess my follow-up question to that was, did the township pursue that money with the state? And if so, were they told no?
I was not here then, so Mr. Draco, I can tell you though that we do work with our state representatives, state senator and state rep. Just this morning I had a meeting with both offices for stormwater, trying to find ways to work together on some of the types of issues you're talking about. But Mr. Draco can...
No, I can. So Sol makes a good point. I mean, so this specific project, I don't want to get into specific details, but it was a specific small project, small $250 million plus, dealing with our basin, our pipes on our roads. To expand it to a larger project obviously would include more dollars, and that includes PennDOT. So Steve Burgo could probably give you more detail, but so we focus on what we could accomplish immediately. Dealing with the state at the time, there were no specific grants for stormwater projects such as these. And as you know, as supervisors, just getting sometimes PennDOT to clean a drain is almost next to impossible. So we wanted to do a project that we could get done with the dollars we had. And he makes an excellent point again about the Stratford Basin. That's using the ARPA money that we received from the federal government that's covering that cost, as well as a intermunicipal cooperation. We're trying to get Radnor to cooperate with us. So yeah, when there's funding available, we will take advantage of it. When there's cooperation with other entities, we'll certainly take advantage of it. But when there's not, we need to get something done. We did, and we'd happy to be talking more of that offline with Mr. Sol about specifically his project. But so in this case, we weren't expanding the scope of the project. It was a specifically directed project, and there's certainly other projects we can do to improve that whole drainage area over time, working with our entities as more money becomes available.
Do you have any comments on the task at hand for today?
No, I mean, I think as long as I'm allowed to follow up on that, because the township solicitor told me that he considered the project closed and said, and I don't live at the top of the hill. I actually live on top of the hill, but at the bottom of like a street that goes like this, and he told me that you live at the bottom of the street. So I didn't think that was very nice as a homeowner. So I'm glad that I'm allowed to pursue it. Thank you.
There is a virtual comment?
Sure.
This is Scott Laird again. I just have one brief add-on to what Mike Heberg said. For the 8,000 residents who make less than $50,000 a year, many of them are folks that are trying to keep from being gentrified out of our township. There is a LIHEAP program to help people in the city who have difficulty meeting their heating bills in the winter. Couldn't you consider some kind of an equivalent LIHEAP program for stormwater for those who are having difficulty absorbing whatever increased costs come as a result of whatever funding solutions you implement? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ann Murphy, Berkshire Terrace. I just wanted to follow up on the last comments about the fee. I think the fee that was used in the presentation was a median fee for the median-sized parcel. But as we studied, a lot of the townships tend to have like a bell curve for the properties in their township. So the smaller properties that they might be talking about would be paying a lesser fee, and then the really big projects would be paying the larger, and that's just sort of a median. So I think there would be some relief just based on the property size. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Miller. I live at 542 Hickory Lane, which is on the top of a hill, but I am in support of a stormwater management fee. Now, during the presentation tonight, I've heard how Tredyffrin has some of the toughest stormwater management of all the areas. And that may be true, but I do want to point out that it's not enforced many times. And a classic example of that is the tributary that runs on a couple neighbors here, the tributary that runs down behind North Valley Forge Road into Trout Creek that runs right into Gateway Shopping Center. That tributary has seen significant flooding that comes, and one of the classic examples of not enforcing it was when the Islamic Church put their parking lot in. They have covered almost 25%. They're at the maximum of impervious. Back in 2020, they tried to get a variance to put a parking lot in. That variance was denied twice in September and November. And then, lo and behold, in 2021, they have come now and paved this road with the permission of somebody in Norristown from the DEP. They've paved a road completely into a wetland area for their idea of a future parking lot. But this is impervious ground that goes straight down to the folks on Coldstream, that feeds into the Trout Creek, that floods Gateway Shopping Center. So I'm just appalled that this is allowed in our township. And it's great to have strong stormwater management laws and regulations, but if it's not enforced, they're useless. And if anybody wants to comment, feel free.
Thank you.
Good evening. Jeff Bro, 78 Old Eagle School Road. I guess my biggest question regarding the funding is there a plan? How do you know what you need and when you need it in order to execute the projects? Is there a schedule? I haven't really seen anything about costs of the potential projects. And I just was wondering if there's anything in the works that, within the next 6 months, will we see something? We understand what the priorities are, but we don't know what they cost. And I'm not sure how you're looking at funding and timing, bond financing and so forth, and trying to, get $70 million today that's going to burn a hole in somebody's pocket, but you can't spend it fast enough, if you know what I mean. So if you could speak to that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
So right now, as of today, we do have identified projects in our 5-year capital plan, which we talk about during the budgeted process. The capital projects that we're talking about when we specifically speak about a stormwater management fee are going to be beyond that. One of the other things that the board has moved us to accomplish starting this year is we'll be hiring an engineering firm some point this year to work to develop a stormwater master plan to identify other projects that will then work to rank in terms of whatever specific criteria we end up coming up with, and then working off of that list for the next generation in reality, because we expect there to be quite a number of projects, but we do have a lot of projects identified, at least for the next 5 years that we could be working on, and we are.
So I think, to follow up on what you were saying, Mr. Duraco, there's really 2 parts of the question and 2 parts of the answer. One is there's been and continues to be sort of one-off type projects. One of the things that a number of us have been talking about for a while is getting sort of a holistic, big picture view so that we're not just doing these one-off projects, that we actually, water runs downhill, you want to sort of take a big picture look at it, may cross even township boundaries. So that's what we're talking about, getting an RFQ out for a consultant to sort of take a big picture look. I think that the new piece of information, and this I think has been said at least once, a lot of what we're doing is building off of what the Citizens Stormwater Committee did. And I can't thank them enough, for providing, a lot of the initial raw information that we're going to be working off of. So that's going to help us, prioritize projects and then develop timelines on, some of these other projects that's saying, this is going to have the most impact. I think the Citizens Stormwater Committee had a nice chart about, cost and effectiveness in 4 quadrants, and trying to make sure you're effectively using your funds for high efficiency projects, and so that's, I think, where a lot of the focus is going to be.
So, and
Just to add to that, what Mark just said, the Citizen Stormwater Task Force results are available on the township website. So if you go to the website, you can see a list of projects prioritized and ranked. And thanks to Ray and Ann, a big part of the reason we're having the discussion today is because of their work, put this issue, framed it and put this issue on the table for all of us. But anyway, if you want a list of projects, it's there on the township website.
And not only that, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I just jumped in here and opened my mouth as usual. There is or I think it's still there, with all the township projects might not be up to the minute, but we have that on our website also. All that's been done, past and present, and maybe a few for the future, but not everything for the future. So you can look at that. They're there with the information relating to those projects. So
I spent a tremendous amount of time looking at the report from the task force, and it is excellent. I agree. I guess the last follow-up question I would have is, you mentioned within the next year or so hiring an engineer. What do you think the timeline is to actually getting your arms around the master plan, the initiative, and what the cash flow needs will be for the various projects that you've already envisioned based on the report?
So I don't have an exact timeline on how long the study will take in developing, the results. Well, I would say we'd probably know more after we have them on board and we work out, what specific criteria we want, in order to list. Is there an
RFP out now, or?
Our engineer, Steve Burgo, is working on developing the scope of work. Once we have that, then he can issue request for qualifications, and then based on that, realistically try to narrow it down between, a couple of firms to issue, to request a proposal from them and then bring that in front of the board.
Yeah, we did put into the 2022 budget the funds to be able to do the RFQ and get the scope of work done and get it out and actually get a consultant engaged.
I think realistically, it's a 2-year project,
That's what I was going to suggest, a couple of years before you
Yeah.
know what you need.
And kind of our goal is to be able to hit the ground running, but have that be developing in the background. So we've already identified projects in the 5-year plan, so we're not in a position where we're just going to be waiting until then to start. We have multiple projects we're starting this year, and, the idea is that we can just hit the ground running. And then once we have that plan, ultimately the goal is to have a very clear on the website which projects we're doing when, and what's in the pipeline and why. So it's very clear for residents to understand
And
where
then
the money's going.
I'll just add this last piece. So the way we are envisioning the capital portion of the fee to work is to have engineering dollars available every year to be split between stormwater and MS4. I don't want to lose sight of that portion of the overall stormwater program. So there'd be money for both of those to keep engineering and design going. And then each year we'll have money available for projects, because a lot of these projects are multi-year projects. And then, we'll have a big chunk of money available for, infrastructure replacement. So again, the inlets and the pipe that, the actual storm pipe to replace that. And so again, it's, we're envisioning to set up the program where it's just a continuous machine where we can pump out, again, it'll determine, based on, again, at the end of the day, what the board wants to set as their level of service and what the expectation of the board is in terms of getting projects done. So, we're hopeful to get two, maybe 3 done a year, but sometimes it's going to be a little too much. Again, we have limitations of staffing, and again, our engineers only can do so much as well, but that's how we envision the overall program.
So, Madam Chair, I just want to expand, I appreciate that question. This is not specifically stormwater related. I guess when I first asked the question, gentlemen, I looked at it probably from a larger perspective. When we understand the stormwater part, and we have a lot of that, at least that initial phase of scope of things we need to get started with understood. But I mean, beyond stormwater, and it's something why we're having this exercise over the next 2 meetings, is something beyond storm. We have other priorities and requirements as a township. We have to fund fire companies. We have to maintain our infrastructure. We have capital expenses after the next 5 years we won't have capital funding for. And maybe we just focus on stormwater this time around, and that's okay. But I think part of this discussion is to understand the stormwater funding part, but is there also other priorities that we want to look at as part of it? And that's kind of why the scope of this discussion was stormwater, yes, but other ways to fund other things that we need to get done over time. And maybe that's a later discussion as a result of this whole conversation with the public. But I thought that that's where the question was going as well. I just thought I'd bring it up because we haven't talked much about other priorities, but part of that discussion is we know we need to solve the stormwater problem, but we do have other obligations that over time we're going to need to address. So I just wanted to throw that back out there as we start to get close to almost the end of the discussion tonight.
Does anyone else in the audience want to speak who hasn't spoken yet before we have Mr. Hafer come back up? All right, thank you.
Catherine Mosino, I live at 46 Berkeley Road. It's my understanding that you're looking for the input from what the residents would prefer or our direction that we're going. I live at an intersection that every time we have a substantial rainstorm, it is knee-deep, and I have been unable to go down my steps of my porch because I am flooded from the backyard to the front yard and all the way up to the traffic light. I'm also one of those people that is at a very low income, and I still would pick the fee. So I want to put my input in for that. And I think my neighbors were here for a little bit, they left. I think that the people that live in that area also would pick that. It is small housing. We don't live in an area where there's a lot of land. It floods every single time it rains. We've been begging for the drains to be cleaned, something to be done with the storm water because it's a problem every time it rains. I also see that every time it rains, that intersection floods, and then it puts pressure on the fire company because they have to come out and get people out of their cars. And that happens almost every time as well. So I just wanted to put my input in for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet? All right.
My apologies, I just walked in, but I've been listening online to a lot. So Arthur Zadrozny, 16 Painters Lane. Thank you, by the way. This is a big project, and I want to thank you all for all the work. And those of you here that have been working, I understand a lot of people have been involved in this. I'm still relatively new to the township. I've only been here 8 years, but I've been in Chester County for over 40 years. I've lived in Westchester. I've served on the school board there for 2 terms. I understand the issues of funding. I understand the issues of taxpayers and trying to make everybody happy. I also worked in corporate America for 25 years. I'm a chemical engineer. I have an MBA. I can crunch numbers with the best. And the idea of selling off the sewer to another company to then allow them to make money off us taxpayers, they got smart people too that can crunch the numbers. They're not going to lose money on the deal. So I would really discourage any serious efforts in that area. These are our assets. We need to manage them as a community. Heard a gentleman earlier, and I appreciate the research people have been doing about the earned income tax. It's funny, I worked and lived in West Goshen for most of my life paying the earned income tax. And I come to a community that doesn't have an earned income tax, and now I find myself being retired. It doesn't benefit me. But be careful. People that live in this community, you know, there are some people that are in need, but of the numbers of people that I heard under 50,000, a lot of them are probably teenagers. I taught high school. There's a lot of young people that file tax returns. So before you get overwhelmed by those numbers, make sure if you decide to go there, I'll dig in there a little deeper. Sorry, I kind of rushed over here. But to me, the bottom line is this is a community project. This is this is stormwater. These are issues that we need to manage as a community. And the only way to do that, in my experience, and the whole purpose of the authority of townships and other authorities to levy bonds is to spread that cost out over the future, over those who are going to benefit from it. And to me, that's the most logical path to go. I live in Painters Lane, 16 Painters Lane. If I didn't make that clear earlier, I've been there for 8 years. We've spent, I'm treasurer, I should know this, in the last 8 years, probably over $20,000 managing our own stormwater. And that's a significant part of our budget. And we flush all the stormwater goes out into the creek right behind us, the Valley Creek that makes its way into Valley Forge Park. If you do go a route of trying to assess stormwater management, I would hope that, and I'm going to be watching that. Those of us that don't impact, why should we be paying as much as those who do impact? So just a consideration if you go the stormwater fee route. Okay?
Excuse me, sir. I was writing down what you were saying, and so I got a little behind. What did you say was, in your opinion, the best thing to do for the
long-term bond.
The long-term bond.
Yeah, because that really says then those who are going to benefit from all the work are also those that are going to be paying for it out into the future years. I wouldn't mind the earned income tax credit since I don't have any earned income tax, but that would be a little selfish of me too. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one quick comment. The gentleman a couple folks ago asked, like, kind of, what's the plan and where do we come up with the numbers for how much money would be needed? And I think Joe had a slide at the last presentation last week where he showed, okay, in order to do the things that we want to do on stormwater between the MS4, the engineering, the projects, we need, call it $3 million a year. And I think to show the folks that are here tonight that didn't see that, it might be helpful for them to understand that this, you know, if it $200 and some per year stormwater fee is not a number that just was pulled out of the air. It was based on the amount of money that would be needed in order to fund the various parts of the $3 million or so that's being proposed.
Thank you. That's a great idea. Mr. Draco can pull that up. Mr. Clark, you want to come up in the meantime?
Just quickly. I don't want to lose sight of the late lamented Andy Dinnerman. The state has an important role to play because PennDOT systems and their performance and their lack of performance really influences a lot of residents. And the task force, recommended a full court press with PennDOT, which you've done with Representative Schustman, Senator Committer, and you mentioned that, but that's a real important contributor of funds to helping the township stormwater problem, which is created by a state agency. In addition, of course, to the grants that you can apply for and are applying for pretty successfully from the state as well. But keeping the pressure on PennDOT is really important, and I'm super pleased to hear you say that you're doing that. One other thing on the sale of the sewer system, And there's been a lot of worry about, well, our rates, even if we keep it, are going to go up because these third parties are owning the treatment system. Well, presumably that would still happen if we sold our conveyance system, unless there was some real antitrust thing going on where the owner of the conveyance system could selectively raise rates, which I would think would be hard. So under any scenario, we might be facing increase in rates for treatment, regardless of who owns it. So thanks.
Do I have to restate my address? Take that as a no. Just an idea. What if you had the ability to get credits? Because if everyone pitches in, they can knock a little bit of this problem out. Meaning, what if I put in a pervious driveway, or I built what's known as a rain garden, which is basically a reverse hole in the ground which absorbs.
I think that if we had a stormwater fee, we'd have to work out all the details, but there'd be incentives to doing those kind of things where your bill would be reduced.
Okay.
That's the idea.
And just to, yeah, and this is something, obviously, and it's getting beyond the funding into but it's something I think a lot of us have given some thought to. And I don't think anything's set in stone, but some of the ideas that at least I've been toying with are the idea of getting incentives, getting, fee reductions for going beyond compliance. So in other words, we have ordinances that say, when you build a new building, when you build a new school, when you build a new office building, you need to have X amount of impervious reduction, or you can't have more than this. You need to have stormwater basins. But if you double the size of your stormwater basin, maybe that's where the credits come in. And that gets a reduction of a stormwater fee. So I think you're right. I think there needs to be some recognition of both what people have done and what people will do in order to help reduce the stormwater issues.
Thank you for considering that.
I can't see online either, so I don't know if you're keeping an eye.
My name's Jamie Godfrey. I reside at 110 Coldstream Drive. I kind of took to heart what Steve Miller was saying earlier about enforcement. Just out of chance, just the other day, I took my dog for a walk up. We don't call it a stream or anything, but that confluence that goes up to the Islamic church is usually dry. It was raining yesterday. And so I walked up it, and I was kind of surprised because there was an existing bridge there, but they basically paved an asphalt road that ends after the bridge. And there's also a collection basin at their original parking lot that this new bridge just totally bypasses. And the other thing that I was surprised by is that at this drainage basin where the bridge is, their whole new bridge has 3 pipes that come out of it, and it's already filled with debris, and we've not yet had a storm like we saw last year. And I think we're all in agreement, we're gonna see these storms come again. Not only do they have this road that just ends, because they're not yet granted to have a parking lot there, but it is their property, and I did notice that they basically have cleared out probably 80%, if not 90% of the trees that grew in that area behind there. The other thing that I took notice on, and I took photographs of, was the fact that this stream has eroded probably double its size down towards our properties down there on Old State Road where the baseball field is and whatnot. When I look at the overall township, I've lived here almost 12 years now, and I walk my dog, through a lot of the parks. I see a lot of the natural terrain, and it's obvious that in the past 4 or 5 years, the runoff and streams that we have widened and grown and are no longer the same they were 10, 15 years ago. I think one of the smartest things we could do as a township to address the overall scope of what we have here would be to do a geological, using aerial photographs, to look back 10, 15 years at what did TE look like compared to today. And I just know from my walks, it would be substantial to see how these streams have widened. Just for example, this little confluence that I'm talking about that goes down towards Clark Field, just 2 years ago was just a little teeny stream. But since you have the Bizzotti fields and then the other field on the other side, it's just soft ground there. So when these storms occur, even yesterday I could see the walls just caving in, falling into the stream. So I think that might be a good place for us to start, is to try and look at it and study the courses of our flows, not just our creeks. You know, we all talk about Trout Creek, how big it is, where all this water is going, but also where it all merges from. And I think we're really not addressing some of these areas. Contention Lane, I know, is a real big problem. Old Eagle School Road, there's no sewer drains to go into to carry away stormwater in most of these hills that come down from basically Route 30 down to where we are now. But that enforcement aspect that Steve mentioned, I think is, because I know homes have put in retention basins, and I don't think they're all put it, by the same company, and once they're put in, are they then inspected to see that they were done correctly? My neighbor across the street has one, and it works great. Stormwater comes in, it goes off his roof, collects in his pond, 2 or 3 days later, it's dry. That's what a retention basin is supposed to do. But I do see other basins that have PVC pipes that come right out of them and go into the street. So I don't think we're really in compliance with a lot of these, management systems that we have. And if we're trying to basically correct what new building or new construction is happening, it doesn't really affect whether we're slowing down that water with all these confluences that are natural. They do occur naturally, and they come through every single area in this township to help drain the water where it naturally goes. So I'm a big fan of kind of looking at what's naturally there to see how we can prevent things. But I think, like I mentioned in the beginning here, this new bridge, 3 little pipes is basically a plug on the dam. And I think that's what we have throughout the township. There's a lot of plugs. And we need to figure out, I'm not an engineer, but I think that's what we need to do as a township, is figure out how can we make these flows go correctly where they need to go. And that's the Schuylkill River. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone else have a comment to make tonight? What about, there's a hand raised, all right.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
I'm joining the meeting late, so forgive me if you've already covered this, but prior to the meeting, I had read some consideration about a change in code having to do with tall trees and their removal. Have you already gone over that?
I don't think that's on the agenda for tonight.
Okay, then I withdraw it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I see that hand still up.
I have a question. Bill, maybe you're the best one to answer this for me. One thing that I've noticed with all this extra flooding is the amount of debris that's in these streams and that gets carried down to the very bottom. I helped clean out a great many places. One of them was where Trout Creek comes to the tunnel that goes towards Gateway Shopping Center, and I was stunned by how much junk gets brought downhill, from other yards or from other stream beds. I mean, some of the stuff was crazy. I've also noticed it in, for example, the stream bed that Mr. Godfrey mentioned, that there often is, and still is, like dead, huge branches. I don't know if it's a tree trunk or huge branches, but they're there, and as they get carried down, they block off these other areas to get to, I guess, their little pathways to get under the bridge or to, keep moving along, and they dam up the water as it's flowing. So do we already have something in place that would require property owners to keep those waterways
So,
Clear?
we do, I mean, again, we do, DEP requires, people who back up the streams, unfortunately, if they put grass clippings, people do put wood into the creek, they put bridges, wooden bridges across that are not permitted, and those things during storms get blown out, and they also pick up other debris as they overflow the stream bed. So, yeah, I mean, there is, but, it has to be reported, someone has to make a complaint because it's in someone's backyard for us to see it. So if there's a report, we do follow up on it. Specifically, the Islamic Society, I know Steve in the engineering department are dealing with that. DEP gave them a permit to access the other side of their property, so it had nothing to do with our stormwater or our enforcement. DEP, as I understand it, allowed them they put a permit in to be able to cross the creek to access the other side of the property. So some things are out of our control, and we rely on people to report. We actually just got one a few days ago about someone putting a wall in the creek, and we went out and took care of that. So, well, I shouldn't take care of it, it's being reviewed. So, yeah, you're not supposed to put anything in the creek or the creekway, the floodway, because that obviously will be picked up and brought downstream.
Thank you.
It sounds like we are ending the night poetically with a storm. All right. Thank you, everyone, for participating this evening. We had a lot of great feedback. That's fantastic. Our next public workshop will be held on April 4th, and in the meantime, please email any comments or questions to ttbosmeeting@tredyffrin.org. We've already received some great feedback through that, so keep it up. It's great. Do I have to vote to adjourn or anything? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, anyone against? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.